Most people grow up with the comforting illusion that life should be stable, predictable, and secure. We are taught to believe in linear progress, that if we work hard, follow the rules, and make careful plans, the future will unfold in a smooth, upward trajectory. Yet professional gamblers know something very different about the world. Volatility is not the exception, it is the rule. Nothing stays constant for long. Markets rise and crash, empires expand and collapse. Technology makes careers obsolete overnight, and even personal lives are shaken by unexpected turns. To them, uncertainty is not a storm that occasionally interrupts a sunny day, it is the climate itself. This mindset changes everything about how you prepare, how you act, and how you win. Think about the way most people react to disruption. When the stock market plunges, they panic. When a new competitor arrives, they freeze. When life doesn't go according to plan, they feel betrayed. That reaction is the result of a worldview built on the myth of permanence. But the gambler never makes that mistake. They enter the game already expecting fluctuation. They know the cards will not always fall in their favor, and that fortunes can change in an instant. Instead of resisting volatility, they anticipate it. They don't build strategies around a false sense of stability. They build strategies for turbulence. This is one of the most important lessons for anyone trying to navigate the modern world. Disruption is not an occasional event. It is the permanent backdrop. Entire industries have been upended in a decade. Streaming killed video rentals. Ride-hailing apps disrupted taxis. Artificial intelligence is now transforming white-collar work. And if you think this wave of change is slowing down, you are mistaken. The gambler's mindset teaches us to stop treating these shifts as surprises, and instead see them as the baseline conditions of the age we live in. What does it mean in practice to accept volatility as inevitable? It means you stop asking for guarantees before you act. Stop clinging to the fantasy that you can map the future with absolute certainty. Instead, you begin to design your strategies to be flexible, to absorb shocks, to capitalize on swings. Just like a skilled card player manages their bankroll, you manage your time, energy, and resources not for smooth sailing, but for inevitable storms. It's about resilience, about understanding that every downturn hides an upswing. Every collapse contains the seeds of renewal. Most people see volatility as dangerous because they confuse movement with risk. But volatility is not the same as danger. It is simply movement, fluctuation, energy. For those who are prepared, it creates openings that no amount of stability would ever allow. In fact, many of the greatest fortunes in history were made in periods of chaos, not calm. The gambler knows this truth instinctively. You don't win by waiting for the world to stabilize. You win by making your moves while everyone else is paralyzed by fear. So the first secret they hold is simple but profound. Volatility is not your enemy. It is not something to fear, but something to harness. Once you shift your mindset to accept that the world will always be unstable, you stop wasting energy wishing it were otherwise. Focus instead on becoming the kind of person who thrives in movement, who sees opportunities in turbulence, and who knows that the game is never fixed in place, it is always in motion. That is the foundation of playing not just to survive in an uncertain world, but to truly win. There is a popular myth that the best decisions in life are made by instinct. We love stories about visionaries who trusted their gut and took a leap of faith that changed everything. Hollywood builds entire narratives around the idea of the lucky hunch. The sudden inspiration, the gambler who just knew what was about to happen. But if you sit across from a true professional gambler, you will discover the opposite. They don't rely on superstition, luck, or mystical intuition. They rely on numbers. For them, data always beats instinct. This doesn't mean gamblers lack intuition. On the contrary, their instincts are razor sharp, but those instincts are trained by data, not divorced from it. The difference between a professional and an amateur gambler lies in preparation. An amateur will walk into a casino, pick a game, and hope fortune favors them. A professional has already studied the probabilities, run the simulations, tracked the behaviors of opponents, committed to memory the thousands of patterns that make up the architecture of the game. By the time they sit down at the table, what might look like instinct is really the sum of thousands of hours of analysis, observation, and testing. The same principle applies in the wider world. Too many leaders still cling to the romantic idea that they can guide their companies or their careers by experience or gut feeling. The problem is that in an age where environments change faster than ever before, yesterday's experience is often irrelevant to today's challenge. Data gives you the ability to see things that the human mind alone cannot. Hidden correlations, patterns, probabilities invisible to raw instinct. That is why those who rely only on what feels right are left behind by those who have trained themselves to see what is statistically likely. Consider how businesses make decisions today. A retailer guessing what customers might buy will be crushed by a competitor using predictive analytics. A financial trader relying on hunches will be outpaced by algorithms processing millions of variables in real time. Even in creative fields, the use of data, from understanding audience behaviors to optimizing product launches, has transformed who succeeds and who fades. The world rewards those who bring structure and evidence to their choices, not those who gamble blind. And yet, there is a paradox here. The gambler knows that while data is essential, it does not eliminate uncertainty. The numbers can show you the odds, but they cannot guarantee the outcome. That is where the balance lies. Data narrows the field of possibilities, and then trained intuition makes the final leap. The professional gambler is not a machine. They are a human who knows exactly when to trust the math and when to sense that the table is shifting in a way the numbers don't yet capture. That combination of discipline and perception is what makes them formidable. The real lesson here is that intuition must be earned. It's not a magical gift, but the refinement of experience and data into something almost instinctive. The rest of the world often confuses blind faith with instinct, but the gambler knows better. They live by probabilities, not hope. They prepare relentlessly so that when the moment comes to act, their choices are grounded in evidence and sharpened by insight. In a time when the world is more unpredictable than ever, the people who thrive will not be those who cling to gut feelings alone, but those who, like professional gamblers, understand that the truest instincts are the ones shaped by data. One of the most counterintuitive truths that professional gamblers live by is the acceptance of loss as part of the process. Amateurs step into a casino hoping to win every hand, convinced that success means never failing, never losing, never walking away empty-handed. But the professional knows better. They understand that losses are not just inevitable, they are essential. Every small defeat is a data point, step closer to a larger victory, and a necessary price to pay for staying in the game long enough to hit the big win. This mindset is not only what separates amateurs from professionals in gambling, but also what separates those who survive disruption from those who are crushed by it in the real world. In life, most people treat failure as final. They make one wrong career move, one bad investment, one poor judgment, and they allow it to define them. They withdraw, retreat, or refuse to play again. But the gambler doesn't panic when they lose a hand. They don't storm away from the table or declare the game rigged. They know the math. They know the probabilities. They know that short-term losses are part of a long-term strategy. The secret lies in their ability to keep perspective. Single moment determines the outcome of the entire game. The same principle applies to careers, businesses, and personal growth. Cannot measure success in single moves. You measure it across the arc of hundreds, even thousands of plays. Take entrepreneurs as an example. Many of the most successful founders endured multiple failed ventures before discovering the breakthrough idea. They were willing to take risks, lose money, face setbacks, keep moving forward because they understood what gamblers already know: the future doesn't reward those who win every hand. It rewards those who endure, adapt, learn. Each loss becomes a source of information, each failure a refinement of strategy. In this sense, losing is not wasted, it is invested. But this principle is deeper than just resilience. What gamblers truly understand is that the cost of playing the game is loss itself. To stay in the game, must be willing to accept small defeats in order to position yourself for larger victories. This demands discipline, it demands patience. Most of all, demands the ability to separate ego from outcome. An amateur ties their identity to every win or loss. They celebrate wildly when they're up and despair when they're down. A professional knows that emotion is the enemy. Losses are not personal, they are mathematical. They are part of the system, part of the rhythm of the game. This perspective is especially critical in times of uncertainty. When markets collapse, when industries are disrupted, when personal lives are shaken by unexpected events, those who survive are not the ones who avoided all losses, but the ones who learned to carry them. The professional gambler's wisdom lies in the recognition that short-term setbacks are not signs of failure, but the cost of staying in motion until opportunity finally aligns. In other words, the biggest mistake is not losing a round, it is walking away before you understand that the next hand could change everything. The real secret here is that loss, paradoxically, is what makes winning possible. Without it, there is no game, no risk, no reward. To fear loss is to exclude yourself from the possibility of gain. But to embrace it, to accept it as part of the journey, is to unlock the endurance required to last long enough to see fortune finally turn in your favor. That is how gamblers think, and that is the mindset the rest of us must learn if we hope to thrive in a world defined not by certainty, but by chance. When you walk into a casino, the cards and dice are only part of the equation. The real game is not just on the table, it's in the minds of the players sitting around it. Professional gamblers understand something most people overlook. Success is as much about psychology as it is about probability. They know that every decision is influenced by emotion, fear, greed, and group behavior. And because of this, they never just play the cards, they play the crowd. This is the same skill that defines success outside of the casino in business, politics, markets, even in the way we interact on social media. The psychology of crowds shapes outcomes more than logic ever does. People like to imagine themselves as rational actors. We like to believe that when faced with decisions, we carefully weigh the evidence and act in our best interest. But gamblers know this is rarely true. In reality, most people are swayed by momentum. They follow the herd. If the table is hot, everyone bets bigger. If someone at the table is panicking, others start to second guess their own moves. This herd mentality creates opportunities for the gambler who can stay calm, detached, and observant. While the crowd reacts emotionally, the professional uses their behavior as data, adjusting strategy to exploit the irrational swings of others. Look at financial markets, and you'll see the same pattern at scale. Bubbles inflate not because the math supports them, but because human beings feed on each other's excitement. Crashes deepen not simply because of fundamentals, but because fear spreads like a contagion. In politics, movements rise not solely on policies, but on the emotional energy of crowds. On social platforms, trends go viral not because they are true or valuable, but because people see others sharing and feel compelled to join in. The gambler understands this instinctively when the crowd is leaning too heavily one way, creates leverage for those willing to take the opposite position. The danger for most people is that they get swept up in the psychology of crowds without realizing it. They invest when everyone else is euphoric, then panic, sell when everyone else is afraid. They adopt opinions not through deep thinking, but because they are reinforced by the collective mood. They conform because belonging feels safer than standing apart. Professional gamblers flip this equation. They train themselves to detach emotionally, to observe rather than participate, and to act precisely when the crowd's emotions create distortion in judgment. Skill is invaluable in a world where collective psychology drives outcomes more than ever before. The rise and fall of businesses, the movement of global markets, the polarization of societies, all of these are amplified by crowd behavior. If you want to thrive in this environment, you cannot simply be a member of the crowd. You must become a reader of it, an interpreter of its moods, and sometimes a contrarian who has the courage to walk in the opposite direction. What gamblers reveal is that the greatest edge is not always in having better information or better tools. Sometimes it is simply in having better emotional control. To see the table for what it is, not what you wish it to be. To watch the crowd, not follow it. to recognize that human beings are predictably irrational, and to position yourself so that their predictable mistakes become your opportunities. In a game where emotion clouds judgment, clarity itself becomes the ultimate advantage. Professional gamblers live in a world where certainty is a luxury no one can afford. Every card dealt, every roll of the dice, every opponent's move carries with it an element of unpredictability. Yet rather than being paralyzed by this, they thrive in it. They understand something that most people resist. Adaptability is more valuable than certainty. The rest of the world spends endless energy searching for guarantees, waiting for perfect information, or hesitating until the path is absolutely clear. The gambler knows that if you wait for certainty, you will never play a hand at all. The game keeps moving, the odds keep shifting, and opportunities vanish in the time it takes you to hesitate. This acceptance of uncertainty changes how a professional gambler approaches decision-making. They never expect to know everything before they act. They know the rules might change, new players may alter the dynamics, or the environment could shift at any moment. Instead of trying to predict and control everything, they build strategies that allow them to adapt quickly. Flexibility becomes their strength. The ability to pivot, to respond in real time, to reframe a situation as conditions change. This is what keeps them in the game long after others have folded. In contrast, most people have been trained to value certainty above all else. We're told to wait until we have enough data, to hold off until we have a foolproof plan, to avoid risk until we can see the full picture. But in a fast-moving world, those who cling to certainty are often left behind. Markets change overnight, technology makes skill sets obsolete, and global events disrupt carefully laid plans. The future no longer belongs to those who demand perfect foresight. It belongs to those who can improvise with incomplete information. Consider how this plays out in business. Companies that cling to old models, waiting for guarantees before evolving, collapse under the weight of disruption. Meanwhile, startups with less information but greater adaptability pivot, experiment, often seize opportunities the giants never saw coming. The gambler's wisdom applies here. Success doesn't require certainty. It requires the courage to act with what you know now while staying ready to adjust when conditions inevitably shift. Adaptability also demands a different relationship with failure. If you expect to have certainty, every mistake feels like a disaster. But if you expect uncertainty, mistakes are just feedback, signals that help you adjust course. The gambler doesn't see a bad hand as evidence that they should never have played. They see it as part of the natural ebb and flow of risk. In life and work, the same applies. You cannot design your way into a perfect outcome. You must step into the unknown, make your move, and then adapt when reality pushes back. Ultimately, adaptability is not about being reckless. It is about preparation and mindset. Gamblers prepare meticulously, but they also accept that no amount of preparation can erase unpredictability. The real skill lies in being able to make decisive moves in the absence of certainty and then recalibrate when the world shifts again. That is why, in the long run, those who demand guarantees are often paralyzed into irrelevance, while those who embrace adaptability position themselves to seize the fleeting opportunities that only uncertainty makes possible. The hardest truth professional gamblers carry with them is that the game is never fair. Most of us grow up with a comforting belief that the world rewards merit, that hard work is always recognized, that systems are designed to give everyone an equal chance. But gamblers cannot afford such illusions. They know that casinos tilt the odds, that the house always builds an edge into the rules, and that even when you think the game is balanced, it rarely is. And yet, instead of retreating in frustration, they keep playing. Why? Because they know that fairness is a myth, but opportunity still exists for those who learn to see where the system bends, where the cracks appear, and where advantage can be found. This mindset runs directly against how most people are taught to think. Many individuals spend their lives waiting for the world to treat them fairly. They wait for the promotion they deserve, for recognition that should come to them, for policies to shift in their favor, for the system to change so they finally have a level playing field. The gambler knows better. They don't expect the rules to change in their favor. They learn how to win despite them. They study the edges others overlook. They exploit inefficiencies. They prepare for the fact that the house will always try to win. In our world, the house takes many forms. It is the way markets are structured, the biases embedded in institutions, the algorithms that shape opportunity. Sometimes it is cultural inertia, sometimes corporate systems, sometimes political power. The gambler's lesson is that waiting for fairness is a losing strategy. The game will not stop being tilted, but you can still find your angle within it. This requires clear eyes and a willingness to see reality without sentimentality. It means letting go of the idea that things should work a certain way and focusing instead on how they do work. There is a kind of liberation in this perspective. Once you stop demanding fairness, you begin to see opportunities that others miss. Notice where people assume the system works evenly and where it actually doesn't. You recognize that sometimes advantage lies in timing, sometimes in information, sometimes in sheer persistence. The gambler thrives on these small openings because they know the big game is never tilted in their favor. They don't waste time resenting the edge the house has. They focus on how to use the slivers of probability still available to them. This lesson is essential in a world increasingly shaped by forces beyond our control. Technology creates winners and losers unevenly. Globalization advantages some while displacing others. AI, automation, and data-driven systems will tilt opportunities even more heavily in certain directions. If you go into this future expecting fairness, you will be disappointed. But if you go into it like a gambler, knowing the odds are stacked, yet searching for the tiny windows where action and courage make a difference, you can still carve out your wins. The truth is, no one ever promised that life would be fair. The gambler knows this better than anyone, but they also know that fairness is not a prerequisite for success. The secret is not to demand a just game, but to become skilled enough, disciplined enough, and adaptable enough to win within an unjust one. In the end, the greatest edge is not having the best cards, but knowing how to play the ones you are dealt. That is the final truth gamblers understand about the world, and it is one that, if embraced, can change everything about how you live, work, and lead.